All right, so piggybacking off my video from yesterday, talking about how election officials are dealing with conspiracy theories and having to basically fight the very people they're serving because we have people who seem to think that they know better than the experts what's going on. Well, now we have a new article. Republican poll watchers in battleground states were U.S. election experts. And that is just so sad that it's come down to, it used to be that you had poll watchers. Yes, some of them were Democrats. Yes, some of them were Republicans, but they actually gave a shit about free and fair elections and doing a good job. And now Republicans seem to think that doing a good job means ensuring that your side wins, which is not what they're supposed to be doing. But anyway, let's get to the article. Be aggressive. Jim Womack, a local Republican Party chair in North Carolina, told the grid of faces who joined the Zoom training session for volunteers to monitor voting on November 5th. The more assertive and aggressive you are in watching and reporting, the better the quality of the election. Really? Being aggressive? What? Now, if you mean, watching like a hawk, okay. But is that really what aggressive means? No, it's not. During the 2-hour session conducted from a Republican Party office featuring a placard of an AR-15 rifle and photos of Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump, Womack, 69, an Army veteran and a retired information systems engineer, instructed 40 volunteers on how to spot nefarious activity. He mentioned a local clergyman who accompanied dozens of Latino parishioners to a voting site, like a shepherd leading a sheep. Okay. First off, yes, if you thought aggressive meant physically aggressive, well, the fact that there's a picture of a frickin' AR-15 and a picture of Donald Trump in a session on how to be a poll watcher, which should be a nonpartisan activity, yes. He means aggressive in the physical sense. And as far as a local clergyman who accompanied dozens of parishioners, and interesting he mentioned Latino parishioners because we've gotta put in racism wherever the fuck we can. So, like a shepherd leading a sheep. I'm sorry, do you not go to church? Aren't priests known as shepherds leading their flock, which is the churchgoers? So, basically you're accusing him of doing his job. I mean, this clergyman doesn't necessarily have to have told them how to vote. But now, granted, depending on the church you go to, you kind of have a feeling as to where a person stands, and probably most people who go to that church have similar political views because of how they interpret the Bible. So, in that regard, you could say something, but that's still not the clergyman telling people how to vote. It's just he's making sure people are able to get to the polls, which the fact that you think that that's a bad thing to ensure that people can get to the polls, voters who are registered and are legal citizens, I get the feeling that this schmuck doesn't think that these people are even citizens, let alone registered, simply because they happen to be Latino. Because why point out that they're Latino parishioners? They're not the only church members who get together and go to the polls together. So, all right. Voter fraud is exceedingly rare in the United States, despite Trump's false claim, supported by a majority of Republicans in Congress, that the 2020 election was stolen. Because, yeah, that's where the Republican Party is now. They have to be a cult. They have to agree with everything Dear Leader says. Now, not all Republicans do that. Many Republicans speak out. Of course, then they get ostracized from the party, but that's a different story. But they speak out. And so do I think all Republicans are like this? No. But if you want to remain inside the Republican Party, you kind of have to be an asshat. U.S. election security officials have said the 2020 election was the most secure in American history. A month-long analysis by the Associated Press found fewer than 475 cases of potential voter fraud in the 6 battleground states challenged by Trump. In other words, not enough to sway an election. With less than 2 weeks to go until the November 5th election, officials in Lee County in the battleground state of North Carolina told Reuters they are concerned that training sessions like WOMAC's, with its call for aggressive scrutiny of the voting process, could lead to disruptions at the polls. The Lee County officials say they are adopting new safeguards to prevent poll workers from feeling intimidated. Because, again, if you're going to teach people how to be poll watchers, that's fine. But if you're doing it with a picture of an AR-15, the gun that's favored by mass shooters, mass murderers, then you're basically I'm going to teach you how to ensure that only the people you want to be able to vote can vote. Which, that's illegal. Womack said election officials should welcome his North Carolina election integrity team as additional eyes and ears to ensure a fair election. NCEIT has close links to the Republican Party. Now, like I said, if this was in good faith, then sure. But is it in good faith? No, I don't think it is. And obviously, North Carolina doesn't think it is either. Reuters observed an October 16th NCEIT training session and obtained previously unreported transcripts of NCEIT planning calls, which raised the prospect of non-citizen voting, which, again, is illegal. But the fact that this dude is pointing out that a bunch of Latinos were driven in to vote, yeah, I think we know who he thinks are non-citizens. Anyone with brown skin. Reuters also spoke to 10 election officials, former election officials, and voter rights advocates who expressed concerns that some poll watchers could disrupt, delay, and undermine confidence in the election, and potentially lay the groundwork to overturn the result if Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris wins. Yeah, that's my concern too, that obviously I want Kamala Harris to win because whether you agree with her policies or not, at least she respects the country, she respects the international community, she respects people, and she respects the way you should properly get things done. Whereas Donald Trump only gives a shit about himself. But at the same time, I'm worried that if she does win, that there's going to be violence regardless. There's going to be violence on when people realize that they're about to become citizens of a fascist country. And then there's going to be those who, if Kamala Harris wins, who are going to insist that the election was stolen because Donald Trump has been spouting that for years. Even when he won in 2016, he still claimed that the election was rigged because he can't handle not everybody loving him and adoring him. So if there's enough people who don't, obviously that has to be fake somehow, because obviously everyone adores him, and the people who claim that they aren't actually Americans or something. The playbook seems to be to cast doubt, sow chaos at every possible opportunity, so that if you lose, you then have laid the foundation in the minds of your followers and supporters to justify additional action, said Tammy Patrick, a former election official who now works at the National Association of Election Administrators, a nonpartisan group of state election directors, which is how it should be, nonpartisan. We shouldn't be having people who have an agenda being a part of this. Poll watchers who monitor the casting and counting of ballots at polling stations have been a feature of the American electoral system for decades. The Democratic Party plans to field its own observers at polling places, including those in Lee County. The Democratic National Committee and the Harris campaign said they are mobilizing thousands of volunteers in voter protection teams across key states, but declined to give further details. Despite its extreme rarity, Trump and his fellow Republicans have made allegations of non-citizen voting a key part of preparations for legal challenges if Trump loses on November 5th. Because, of course, if Trump wins, then magically they somehow overcame the fraud. But if he loses, then obviously the fraud was rampant. Non-citizen illegal migrants are getting the right to vote, being pushed by crooked Democratic politicians, Trump wrote on his Truth Social platform in July. Of course, you don't need me to tell you that's bullshit. NCEIT addresses non-citizen voting in 2 planning calls, according to the transcripts obtained by Reuters. In July, a participant raised the subject of how to spot an illegal and suggested that a person who can't speak English probably doesn't have the right to vote. Okay. Now, anyone who's actually bothered to try to learn a language knows it's extremely difficult. And the older you get, the harder it is. And depending on the language, it's even harder. So, I mean, look at Melania, for crying out loud. She still has a heavy accent. Does she speak perfect English? No. Am I going to criticize her for it like some people do and make fun of her? No. I'm not going to, because English is hard. Learning a language is hard. Even if she did speak 5 languages, which people have been casting doubt on, even if that's true, that doesn't mean that A, you know every language at the same level, and B, there are going to be some languages that you're just not as good at. So, no, just not being able to speak English, and what does that even mean? Do they have to speak like I do? Without an accent? Can speak in full sentences? Oh, wait. Then Trump wouldn't be a citizen either, because he sure as hell can't speak in complete sentences. How do you decide who's an illegal based, how do you decide who doesn't speak English? how do you come to that conclusion that someone doesn't speak English? That their accent is so heavy that you can't understand them? Seriously, what is the bar? One participant in an NCEIT planning call in May said she makes signs for polling locations in different languages, including in African, stating only U.S. citizens can vote. She called her signs PSYOP, shorthand for psychological operations aimed at influencing people's behavior. Okay. Now, because this is a participant in the planning, I'm going to say that she honestly thinks that African is a language. She probably heard that in South Africa they speak Afrikaans and doesn't know the freaking difference between African, the continent of Africa, and Afrikaans, which is a language spoken in South Africa. So I'm going to say that she, in bad faith, is an idiot, because she probably actually believes that it's African, not Afrikaan. Now, there could be people who just simply aren't aware, and that they did mean Afrikaans in good faith, but they've only heard Africans because they're surrounded by morons. So, and I say that not because getting those confused isn't hard, it's just that the people who are telling them this either are too dumb to know the difference, and they are in a position where they should know the difference, or they just don't care because they don't feel like they should educate themselves on the difference. Maybe they were told and they just don't care. Who knows? But chances are this is in bad faith, not a good faith. I just made an oopsie. All right. And seriously, how is that a psyop? I mean, people know that only citizens can vote. The only person you're influencing are the idiots who think that just because someone can speak multiple languages that they somehow are not citizens. I just can't. Womack said that he doesn't recall that conversation, does not agree with the assertion. These live calls are conversations and we get lots of inquiries, he said. He added that NCEIT strives to educate and train participants in accordance with the law and sometimes has to correct invalid statements and assertions on the calls. And yet he claims he doesn't recall this particular conversation. Either you get so many wackadoodle calls that you just forget some of them, or you're lying. And like I said, the fact that he had a picture of Donald Trump and an AR-15 leads me to believe that he just doesn't want to admit that that shit is happening in his group. But he said that NCEIT's antenna are up about the influx of Hispanics and they're accidentally being registered to vote. Accidentally? What a way to say that you don't see Hispanics as being citizens no matter what. I spent 10 years in Chicago Heights it was mostly half black, half Hispanic area. And amongst the Hispanics, you still heard accents because it was that prevalent to be surrounded by first-generation Hispanics, whether it be Mexico or some other Hispanic country. Mostly Mexico, but other Hispanic countries as well. So, of course, they retained the accents. By this measure, none of them are U.S. citizens and none of them should be allowed to vote. Seriously, what the hell? Yes, there's U.S. citizens. Hell, there is a city in Wisconsin where even though the people there have been multi-generational U.S. citizens, they still speak with Polish accents. But they're still U.S. citizens, and I'm sure these guys would not see it as any other way because, we're not going to be consistent or anything. We just want to be racist. All right. And how do you accidentally register someone to vote exactly? Patrick Gannon, Public Information Director for the North Carolina State Board of Elections, said there was no evidence of non-citizens trying to affect the election in any way. Exactly. Because these people tried so hard to make it to the U.S. and they want to become citizens. Why would they risk being deported for voting in an election where they might not, for voting in an election where their influence isn't going to change anything anyway? It's stupid. NCEIT would challenge any voter it believed was ineligible, Womack said. He also told trainees to be polite and said that NCEIT does not condone voter suppression or intimidation of any kind. That's why you said aggressively challenge voters as to whether they're actually eligible. Because you don't want to condone voter suppression or intimidation. Either you're lying or you're really, really dumb. Now, granted, those aren't mutually exclusive, but in this case, it could be one or the other. Some voter rights advocates said the training could lead to unfair targeting of Black or Latino voters. No. I mean, seriously. How could they possibly do that? We're concerned that rhetoric about non-citizens voting will be used to say that there was some sort of irregularity and tried to prevent the election results from being certified, says Caitlin Kaiser, Policy Director at watchdog group Democracy North Carolina. Womack does not accept the evidence that election fraud is very rare. Shocking. While he said he does not use the word stolen to describe the 2020 election won by Democrat Joe Biden, he insists the election was manipulated by big tech, big government, and big media. Spoken by someone who has no freaking clue how elections work. The media doesn't declare someone the winner because they just feel like it. No, they go based on population and how the population has historically voted, and then based on the actual data. I mean, granted, I don't like it how the polls just close in a state and immediately someone is declared the winner. I mean, I understand that they pretty much know that certain states are in the pocket of certain parties. I understand that, but I don't know, just let some votes be counted, like maybe half, or I don't like that either, because what if it turns out you're wrong? But, I mean, I don't know if that's happened, that they had to backtrack. Hell, even Fox News had to declare Arizona for Biden, even though there were people who were upset about it, because that ensured that Biden won. But the fact remains that, the data says something. Media is not the one who's manipulating anything. The only way they might be manipulating things is declaring the winner when there are certain states who haven't voted yet. Like Hawaii is, 4 or 5 hours behind California. So you're declaring a winner when Hawaii is still voting. So yeah, I would rather they don't do that. Simply let all polls close and then declare the winner. I honestly don't like it when they do that either, but so I can see how the Hawaiians would then question, well, what's the point at this point? I mean, a winner has been declared. Why should we vote anymore? But you should, because down ballot races are a thing. And you're also voting for your local elections. But I can see how that might get people to be less enthusiastic to vote for president or whatever if the votes are already in. So if you want to vote for a certain person for president and you see that they don't have a chance in winning, I can see how you might question whether it's worth marking your ballot, but I feel that way about the Electoral College. If you're in a state, if you are a Republican in a state that typically goes Democrat, you could say the same thing. What is the point? Because it's not going to influence anything. So yeah, I don't like how quickly certain states are called. Like immediately after polls close. So I can understand that. But there is no big tech influencing anything, because if they did, they wouldn't be settling lawsuits with Dominion because they made up shit about their voting systems. So, yeah, there is that. Big government? How? How is the government influencing anything? If they were influencing stuff, do you think that Hillary Clinton would have lost to Donald Trump? No. The fact that Trump won and Trump lost in 2020, and that has nothing to do with big government. I mean, who the fuck was in office at the time? It was Trump. So if big government was getting in the way, why would they ensure that they lost? I mean, that makes zero sense. So, yeah, this is a conspiracy wackaloon. The vast majority of the operations seeking to shape the election, or I should say not shape, to exploit vulnerabilities in the law and to commit fraud in the election are coming from the left, Womack told Reuters in an interview. Which is bullshit. There's no doubt about it, he added. Right. But he's not interested in intimidation or voter suppression. Jesus Christ, you are forgetting a conversation you had about someone who's pointing out that people who don't speak English can possibly be citizens. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think you're a bad faith actor, and I don't believe a word you say about you wanting to be, that you're not for voter suppression or voter intimidation. I don't believe that at all. NCEIT is affiliated to the Election Integrity Network, an organization run by Cleta Mitchell. Oh God, that idiot. An attorney who played a key role in trying to overturn Trump's 2020 election loss. In 2020, Mitchell was on the call when Trump asked Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to find enough votes to reverse Biden's victory in the state. Right. Yes, this is getting worse and worse for you. You keep saying how you don't want voter suppression or voter intimidation, but yet you are siding yourself with people who make shit up. You know, you don't find one more vote. You don't ask people to find one more vote if you honestly won. You just count the votes. And the fact that that was even a thing and that Cleta Mitchell is beating her chest about it. And let's face it, how many times has this been litigated? And each and every time Trump lost, that should kind of give you the idea that this isn't happening. And if you think that's big government, no, the judiciary is part of government, but not part of the executive branch. If you think that, may I suggest you take remedial civics? Because I'm sorry, no. Christina Norton, the director of the Republican Party's Election Integrity Unit, joins a weekly Friday morning call hosted by Mitchell's EIN group, according to Womack, who also attends. Mitchell and Norton did not respond to Reuters when asked for comment. Shocking. The Republican National Committee says it has trained tens of thousands of volunteer poll watchers, instructing them to call an RNC hotline to report suspected irregularities. The RNC poll line? Shouldn't you be calling election officials and not the Republican National Committee? RNC poll watchers who do not act within the law will be dismissed, the party said on its website. I find that hard to believe. I mean, unless what they mean by that is people who get caught being a disturbance. Because obviously that's what they want. Because again, why would you have a hotline for suspected irregularities that go to the RNC? No. That's what election officials are for. An official familiar with the operations of the RNC's Election Integrity Unit, who spoke on the condition of anonymity, said the RNC has no relationship with groups such as NCEIT that train poll watchers. The official said RNC poll watcher efforts are independent from those groups. Okay. So it's good to know that, that the RNC is distancing themselves, but still at the same time, they have a hotline. That concerns me. In Lee County, where Trump won comfortably in 2020 and 2016, the lines are blurred. Womack is himself the Republican Party chair. He said NCEIT sends its list of poll watchers to both parties for possible inclusion in their efforts. Yeah, this is getting worse and worse. To me, it seems like they're trying to gather data that they could put together to then create doubt in the election, said Lee County Elections Board Chairwoman Susan Feindl, a Democrat. Ding, 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 ding. All I want is to have a free and fair election and to be left alone so that we can do our jobs. Exactly. Again, once upon a time, you could have bipartisan poll watchers and you didn't have to worry about one side being nefarious. Because all they wanted was free, fair elections and whoever had the best platform won. Now it's not like that. Lee County election officials say they have taken precautions to guard against what they see as overly aggressive behavior by some poll observers who had been trained by NCEIT. Oh, what a shock that a man who has an AR-15 rifle pictured behind him while he's doing these training sessions would have overly aggressive poll watchers. Never would have guessed. After state legislation last year allowed observers to move more freely around polling stations, Lee County officials said they ordered curtains for the booths. They also purchased screen protectors to cover voting machines and privacy sleeves to cover ballots. Yeah. I mean, granted, I remember when I was little, the booths used to have protection. Used to have a protective cover so people couldn't walk by and see who you're voting for. But then again, the polling machines were different too. So, but yeah, it's so sad that they have to go through all that to make people's votes private, which is how it should be. Poll watchers should not be looking over someone's shoulder to make sure they're voting for the right person. I mean, that is not what elections are for. What, did they see the elections in the Russian-occupied parts of Ukraine and say, yeah, we want to do that? I mean, come on. In the 2020 midterm congressional elections, the North Carolina Election Board registered 21 incidents regarding poll watchers, including 12 of voter intimidation, 8 of election official intimidation, and 1 of voter interference. Their records do not specify who trained those poll watchers, though you can make educated guesses. In the primaries earlier that year, Womack followed an election worker who was transporting ballot boxes to the Board of Elections office, according to an incident report reviewed by Reuters. Because that's not creepy at all. Womack was not charged with wrongdoing. He told Reuters he had wanted to ensure that the ballots were delivered safely to the Board of Elections office. He does not view his actions as intimidation. Dude, you followed an election worker, assuming that the election worker is corrupt, to make sure that the ballots. I mean, you are not an official part of this process. You had no right to be doing that. That is just creepy. And I do not give a rat's ass if you don't consider it intimidation. I mean, what is it with people who are saying, oh, well, I don't see what I did as anything wrong, that somehow the rest of the world should view it the same way because you didn't intend. That's not the way the law works. Since then, Lee County Elections Director Jane Ray Fawcett has asked local police to be on standby at the end of polling in case election officials need additional security as they transport ballots. Exactly, additional security. That means they already have security. So your dumb butt does not need to be following people anywhere. You're just being creepy and you're being scary. And people should not feel intimidated just because you exist. The concerns about overly aggressive poll watchers are not limited to North Carolina. My main concern is voter intimidation by poll watchers, as well as intimidating election workers and getting into their faces, generally slowing them down and creating disruptions, said Andrew Garber, a lawyer and elections expert with New York University's nonpartisan Brennan Center for Justice. I mean, like I said, once upon a time, legit poll watchers were just that. They were just there to make sure that everything went off without a hitch and that people who are registered to vote, and there's no hanky-panky going on. And now it's become, for some Republicans, that unless they're people who you want to be voting, then they shouldn't be voting, and we should intimidate them. And that is not how poll watching goes. You do not get to decide who is a legit voter. There are ways to discover whether the voter is legit. That is not what you are there for. You are there to make sure that nobody is trying to intimidate or somehow influence the election. Your job is not to be the ones to do that. Your job is not to influence the election. Your job is not to intimidate. But yet some people seem to think that that is their job because they are supposed to catch illegal voting when that is not their job. That's what election workers are there for. That's why they have poll books. That's why they ask for ID. That's why they look up the name and you sign your name. I mean, I just do not know what else to tell you. I mean, they're in a cult. They've been bamboozled by Trump, and now they're just looking to justify their doubt. And they have to be freaking racist about it. Because notice nobody ever says, oh, you know, that Polish person doesn't speak English well, so they probably are illegal. Literally nobody says that. Whenever you talk to these people, nobody says that about a white person. It's always a person of color. Because that's who they hate. That's who they are racist against. So it is so obvious. It is so freaking obvious. This is why whenever I find out that someone's a Trump voter, I want nothing to do with them. Because obviously I would like to convince them with this channel. I would love to convince them that they're wrong. But at the same time, I also know it's like talking to a brick wall. They're not going to listen to a word I have to say. And I sure as hell do not want to be friends with them because they, by being a Trump voter and being this aggressive especially, they are basically saying that their morality is completely opposite mine and there is no common ground anymore. So I want nothing to do with you. But anyway, that is all I have for this article. And I just had someone comment, could you do shorter content so I come out with a practically an hour video? Yay me! Anyway, with that, I will see you guys in the next video.